يا الله يا مولانا. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. 1 second, let me just do this. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أمسينا وأمسى الملك لله والحمد لله لا شريك له، لا إله إلا هو وإليه المصير. أمسينا على فطرة الإسلام وكلمة الإخلاص وعلى دين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى ملة أبينا إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين. اللهم إني أمسيت منك في نعمة وعافية وستر، فأتم علي نعمتك وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما أمسى بي من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك، فلك الحمد ولك الشكر. يا رب لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. رضينا بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا. ثم أما بعد. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to our Saturday night presentation. And as we promised you yesterday, tonight we're going to have a special presentation, as we do every Saturday. Like last Saturday, we had this great webinar with experts from ICSD Medical Center about the COVID-19 vaccine. Tonight, inshallah, we're going to talk about another very important topic to everyone in the community. What to do when a member of your family dies. What are the procedures? What are the actions? And for that, we have invited our dear brother, Yasir Qaziha. Welcome. MashaAllah. And Yasir now is the one in charge of the mortuary and burial service here at the Islamic Center of San Diego. And we are so glad to have Yasir doing this service. And this is a very important service that we proudly provide to our community. This is something very important. All of us, we die. All of us. And one of the rights of the Muslims upon one another at the time of death is for the body to be honored by washing the body, by wrapping the body in the shroud, al-kafan, by offering janazah prayer, and by burying the body. This is the right of every Muslim upon the other Muslims. No matter how financially good or bad is the person, the community has to take care of the one who passes away. So, there are so many questions that we do receive from people, and I can tell you that a lot of people in our community have no idea about the procedure until somebody from their family members or a loved one passes away. Then they start trying to do whatever they have to do. So that's why we're going to have Brother Yasir answering the questions. So, Brother Yasir, before going to the questions, is there any first comment that you want to make.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Yeah, I mean, there's just a couple of things that, kind of I want to, address in the beginning. Funeral arrangements it's not something we usually prepare for because, it's not something we want to think about. In terms of ourselves and our loved ones, especially our loved ones, it's just something we tend to avoid and just kind of, wait until the moment comes and then kind of handle it there. And that's such a difficult part of it, to just, arrange a funeral or plan a funeral or plan any kind of funeral services for yourself or for your loved one. So, I mean, I definitely, I think this is a really great session, and I think, just being informative, because, all the families that come in to me, I mean, they have lots of questions, and sometimes we do things out of order, which actually, prolongs the burial. So when you do things out of order, sometimes you kind of skip some steps, and then when the time comes, it's usually rushed, and when it's rushed, you forget things, and you don't even give yourself some time to grieve. And Islamically, like, we should be burying as soon as possible. That's, it's very important. But unfortunately, living in a country where there's a lot of regulations and licensing when it comes to this stuff, it could take some time. So preparing ahead of time is definitely very important. So, I think this is something that, we should really, push for in our community, especially for people that, when time comes, financially it's not, it's pretty tough. Yeah.
All right. Jazakallah khair. The first question, Brother Yasser, do you recommend that people contact ICSD funeral assistant, which is you, prior to the death of their loved one, or just wait till the death occurs? What do you recommend families and individuals to do?
Yes, definitely. If you're expecting, the time for someone close to you to come, then definitely reach out regarding any questions that you may have, just so I can kind of point you in the right direction, because there's a difference between whether, someone passes away in the hospital, on hospice at home, or any other kind of causes that may occur. There's a different process for each location. So for me to kind of point you in that right direction and to prepare you in advance for what to expect is definitely very useful, and especially in terms of tracking down a doctor, because that's the most important part when it comes to issuing a burial permit and a death certificate. We need that doctor to sign off on it, and that's usually the thing that takes the longest. So if you prepare that doctor ahead of time, then you'll have a much easier time preparing that cause of death. And so definitely reach out to me. I mean, my number is open. I mean, if you'd like, also reach out to the office, leave a message for me, and I'll get back to you regarding any questions that you may have. And then I'll also put an email on the site if you also have any long-term questions that we can answer, later on as well.
Great, mashallah. And by the way, I know that in the past we had the option for people to reserve their grave. Do we still have that option right now or not?
Yeah, so I mean, currently, obviously, right now, it's really tough with the grave situation in San Diego specifically, just because, grave plots it's like real estate. So right now, the rates are very, very high. So it's really hard for ICSD to find an affordable package for our community, because for our community, when it comes to death, we need to save as much money as possible, because any money that's spent unnecessarily for a death is against our religion. It's not something that we really like to encourage, to spend any additional costs. So currently we're not accepting any reservations. We only have as needed. We only have about a little over 30 graves left. So those are only used for as needed situations, emergency situations, because previously, we ran out of graves and, we didn't know where to send our community members. So it was really hard. So they would end up spending, 3 times as much for a grave than what we could, provide it for. So right now it's only as needed. But inshallah, ICSD is working very hard to find some packages, some affordable packages. So in the near future, inshallah, we will start reserving, and we'll definitely, make that announcement with ICSD when it comes time to reserve plots, and we can kind of set up appointments then.
MashaAllah. Thank you so much. We know, Brother Yasser, that there are 2 parts. There is the mortuary part and there is the burial part. So let's start talking about the mortuary part. So what does mortuary service include and how much it costs?
So depending on the mortuary you decide to go with, because obviously ICSD does not have an in-house mortuary. We do not have a funeral manager here, a funeral director. So we don't really provide the mortuary services for the licensing and all that stuff. So we have a really great relationship with one of the mortuaries, Bishop Mortuary, and we have that information on the ICSD website as well. And Bishop Mortuary handles all of our Islamic Center of San Diego cases. They do a very, very great job getting it as fast as possible. And so, it ranges from the mortuary, obviously. Sometimes you'll end up spending upwards towards 4,000 to 5,000. But with Bishop, we have a really great understanding with them where they charge between, depending on the case, obviously it's case-by-case basis, because there's obviously different charges, different fees that you might have to pay depending on the cause of death and depending on where the location is and stuff. But it ranges between 2,000 and 3,000. And sometimes that could also include the washing as well. So we have also, the ICSD has a great relationship with the mortuary where, if you need a washer, if you need somebody to wash the body, they'll go ahead and they'll reach out to, the washers that ICSD appoints to them. And then they'll also include that in their fees as well. So they actually take very good care of us and they do a very great job. So it ranges between, and this is only for the funeral services. So this includes the transportation, so picking up from the hospital, picking up from home. Sometimes, we have them pick up all the way up from Northern California or out of town even. So that obviously adds on a few fees. So transportation, storage. So the facility obviously, they need a charge for storage and all that. Licensing, and that includes the burial permit and then the death certificate as well. That's also a longer process, but that mortuary, Bishop Mortuary, actually does a really great job with that. And then sometimes the washing as well, which I already went over it before.
Great. Jazakallah khair. As you have mentioned, sometimes the paperwork in order to prepare the body and get ready for the burial, the paperwork takes a lot of time, and we have a bureaucratic administration when it comes to that. I've heard in the past, people in the county were not there to give the permit and all that stuff. So for people to understand, what are the important documents that people should provide to do the paperwork, so they know ahead of time what kind of documents they need?
Yes, of course. So some of the main documents that is needed, obviously, like I said, this is case-by-case basis. So depending on the case, there might be different documentation that the mortuary might actually require you in order to fill out the paperwork. But just the basic general documents that's needed for every case is the Social Security card. And obviously, in some cases, they won't have a Social Security card, so they can go ahead and go with any kind of identification card, a passport, whatever it may be. But Social Security card, is definitely very important, because so some people are actually issued 2 Social Security cards in their life, or more than one. And so if you give them the wrong one, then it actually gets bounced back, and that actually, takes another few days for it to process. So make sure, if you have more than one Social Security card, bring all of them over. So that's very, very important to bring all of them over and make sure you have the proper spelling of the name on the Social Security card and on the identification card. So we'll have the Social Security card, the identification card, any hospital paperwork, so any of the discharge paperwork, in terms of, doctors signing off on it, any kind of, hospital paperwork, if they pass away in the hospital, or hospice. So if the hospital paperwork as well, you'll have a nurse that actually shows up to the home to, pronounce the death, and then they'll actually sign off on the form. You're going to go ahead and bring all those forms in as well. And that's very important. And just tying back to, going back to that point, the first thing that you need to do, obviously, is if somebody passes away in the home, this is something I should have brought up earlier. If someone passes away at home, the first thing you need to do is call 911, regardless of if they were on hospice or if there was, you don't know the cause, if it was just kind of, out of random, which happens a lot. In a lot of cases, but even if they're on hospice and the hospice tells you, oh, give us a call if you think that they passed away or whatever, you call 911 because they need to report that in order to go forward with the permitting process as well. So call 911 and they'll either tell you, okay, give the hospice a call, and they'll document it on their end, and then the county will go ahead and grab that information when it's time to pull that death certificate. So call 911 and then call the mortuary. So the mortuary is Bishop Mortuary. They'll answer the phone 24/7. Go ahead and give them a call, and then the next day you can give ICSD a call, give myself a call in terms of going forward with the grave purchase.
So we don't advise people when the death occurs to call our office here or to call the imam. Actually, it happened a few times when the death occurred and people called me, and I told them, you're supposed to call 911 in order to report this. So this is very, very important to know. So we know that within our community, families, they would like to honor the bodies of their loved ones, so they want to bury them as soon as possible. So at average, how long it takes to finish all the paperwork, to prepare the body between the time of the death until the burial? We know sometimes the process get delayed a little bit, and you have mentioned a good example, which is a mistake in the spelling of the name, a mistake in the Social Security card. And I remember when this happened, like a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, there was a mistake in one case in the Social Security number, and the whole process got bounced, and it was by the beginning of the weekend. So the burial was delayed for several days. So people want to know what's the average time of finishing the whole process and getting the body to be buried.
Yes, definitely, and this is actually a really great point as to why you should be prepared ahead of time, why you should have the contacts, and even before somebody passes away, you should definitely reach out to the mortuary. Even before, if you're expecting them to pass away, reach out to the mortuary and let them know, hey, I have so and so who's might be passing away between today or 2 days from now. So just letting giving you a heads up. That way they can go ahead and get started on that paperwork, and then when the time comes, they can everything will be a lot smoother, a lot faster. So this whole process, obviously it ranges depending on how prepared you are and the steps that you take. So first thing you do, you call Sheikh Taha. I mean, that's also gonna run you in a little extra, a little delay, right? So definitely, if you're prepared, I would say it would take about 2 to 3 days. But then if if you're going to be expecting some delays, it might take upwards towards 7 days or so. And I've seen some cases go between 7 days to like 10 days as well. And the reason for that is because on the weekends, the cemetery closes, so we can't bury on the weekends, as well as the county. So when it comes to permitting, the burial permits and all that, that needs to be done Monday through Friday only. So if if someone passed away Friday or Saturday, you're going to be expecting a burial of best case scenario is Monday or even Tuesday. So definitely keep that in mind, that the weekend is also a buffer zone, that the county is closed, the cemetery is closed. So that's something also that can cause some delays. So be prepared for that. And I know we want to just kind of get it over with as soon as possible. I mean, in a lot of cases that we've had, they just wanted to kind of just be done with it and just grieve already, because you don't have time to grieve until after you bury them, right? And it's the hardest part, and it's really hard to tell hey, you're going to be expecting delays. That's honestly we don't want to tell you that. We don't want to tell families that. And sometimes they look for someone to blame, and they end up blaming us, or they end up blaming, the cemetery, or they end up blaming the mortuary. Nobody wants to delay this. It's a matter of these obstacles that we have to hit. So, you can definitely estimate between 2 to 7 days. 7 days usually max. So working with this mortuary, she does, Gwen, her name's Gwen, she's the owner of the mortuary. She does a very, very great job. So, she can usually get it done between 2 and 3 days. But, if we were to expect some delays, we should expect up to 7 days max.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I would like to mention something here. A common mistake done by families of the deceased person, sometimes they announce the day and the time of the burial without getting the information. I remember several cases we ended up, this is before COVID-19, we ended up having people coming here to pray Salat al-Janazah and then to go straight to the graveyard, and the body was not here yet. So this is something that you should pay, attention to it. Don't confirm to people the time and the day of the burial without getting the confirmation from the mortuary or from Yasser or the one who is in charge. So this is very important. Now, when it comes to the grave, so the mortuary part now is done. Now, when it comes to the burial, our spots, the graves are in La Vista Memorial in National City on Sweetwater Road, and so it's called. It has a name, Rahma Garden. Yes, it's Rahma Garden. So, what's the process of purchasing the grave? How much it cost and what are the things included? I mean, we hear sometimes about the opening and the closing, and so what are the things that are included in the price of the grave?
Yes, very, very important. And when it comes to the grave, it's a little easier. That process of purchasing the grave is a little easier than the mortuary, part of it. So definitely first thing you need to focus on is the mortuary. So that's, we went over that, alhamdulillah, and everything, and if you have any additional questions, definitely reach out because it could get a little complicated in some cases. So, definitely focus on that first, and then the grave is pretty simple. You can do, the whole grave purchase within a matter of a couple of hours. So, it's very quick, very simple. So don't stress too much about the grave because that can be done. It's very simple. But, focus more on the funeral costs, on the mortuary costs. So currently, as I mentioned before, we're not doing any reservations. So the process of it is, you're either expecting someone to pass away soon or somebody has already passed away. And then in that case, then you'll reach out to either, the front office. You can reach out to the front office and then they'll, go ahead and give you my number, or you can get my number, from the ICSD website. And then go ahead and give me a call and I'll set up an appointment to meet you here at the masjid. And then we'll go over all the paperwork. All you really need is just an ID card of the deceased, and then your own ID card as a purchaser. And so right now, currently, the plots that we're selling as needed, is a standard plot. It has a tomb inside the plot, so there's a tomb. There's each wall. The floor is dirt, and then the walls are concrete, and then there's a concrete slab that goes on top. A lot of cemeteries, they'll charge you for the grave, and then they'll charge you an additional, $1,500 to $3,000 for an open and closing. But alhamdulillah, the masjid closed down a deal where they included the open and closing and the grave all together. So when you purchase a plot from us, it includes the open and closing, so you do not have to pay that additional fee. The only additional fee that you'll have to pay is the headstone, and I think we'll get into that a little later. So it includes the open and closing, the slab, and then that is $5,650. Like I said, these plots are definitely, rising because just a couple of years ago we were selling the plots for, $3,500. So that's even less. We used to sell it for, $1,000, $2,000, and then it just kept going up, and now it's just kind of skyrocketing because graves are very scarce right now, and it's very, very expensive. So alhamdulillah, we were able to get the cheaper end of that in the current rate. So currently the averages are around between 9 to 16,000 for each plot, and sometimes they'll even charge an additional open and closing for that. So alhamdulillah, we were able to kind of close down a deal on the lower end. It is $5,650 for each grave, including the opening and closing. And so what we'll do is we'll make an appointment. You'll come to ICSD. I will complete a ICSD contract. We'll take the payment here. and then I'll give you all the paperwork you need to, grab, and then you'll actually have to go to the cemetery to close out, everything. You won't need to pay any additional fees there. I think it's just a licensing fee of $8, but that's about it. And then if you choose to, to purchase the headstone, then you can purchase it from there. And yeah, so I mean, obviously, that is still a steep price, especially if you're adding that with the additional $2,000 to $3,000 of the mortuary expenses. It definitely runs up your price for each case. But alhamdulillah, I mean, if you ever need any kind of financial need, ICSD has a really great program. Definitely reach out, and then we'll kind of go over the qualifications and different procedures of that, and then we can definitely raise that money for you as well if you're in a hard financial situation.
As a matter of fact, as I have mentioned at the beginning, it's a duty upon the entire community to honor the body of the deceased person. So no one should be left behind. And we have seen several times, mashallah, the entire community coming together to sponsor the burial of our community members. So alhamdulillah, I mean, this is something great that our community does all the time. So you have mentioned the the stone, the headstone. We call it the mark. In Arabic, we call it a shahid, which is that sign stone where the name of the person is mentioned. So people often ask us whether we provide that or not. So how can people get that?
So that's not something that we actually sell ourselves. That's something that when you go to the cemetery, you purchase that through them, because they have specific regulations on the size, the material that's used, and all that kind of stuff. So it's very technical, so we can't provide that. So the cemetery actually sells that to to the families, and that's usually for a basic one. It's usually around $700 or so, and that's not required, but it's something that obviously you could use in terms of going to visit. You'll see especially years down the line, it kind of lasts a long time. And definitely my recommendation, my personal opinion, is to keep it very simple. Just having the name of the deceased, the dates, and a couple other things in terms of like the family members, beloved son, beloved, whatever you need to have, any kind of, the name of Allah or the ayahs, definitely not recommended, because people are going to be walking all over that. A lot of the times people buy, huge like shrines, and it runs their budget up, an extra $5,000 or so. And that's, that's, like I said, that's money spent that's unnecessary for this funeral. That's unnecessary for this burial. And in Islam, that's not recommended at all. That's definitely not something, and I know Sheikh can talk a little bit more about this, but my recommendation is just to buy the basic one, have the name, have the dates, and then kind of, be on your way from there.
Yeah, definitely. In Islam, it's not permissible to spend extra money for something luxury. For example, when it comes to al-kafan, the shroud, it should be very simple. Just any piece of fabric that is white. So if somebody thinks that, this is my father, my mother, my spouse, my whoever, loved one, I want to spend as much money, I don't mind. I will provide a kafan, a shroud made of silk. No, this is not permissible. This is haram, to spend any extra money for luxuries when it comes to the burial. Islam teaches us to go very, very simple. And as Brother Yasser mentioned, there is nothing wrong to put like small sign just to kind of distinguish the one who is in that grave. But please avoid writing ayatul Quran, verses from the Quran, because people step on it, whether you like it or not. And sometimes people also put a big, stone to cover all the grave, thinking that when people see that, they won't step. No, people will step, because if you have seen the graves here, they're not like our regular Islamic graveyards back home, where there are spaces between the graves where people can walk. Here, each grave is next to the other. I mean, there is no inch space between the graves. So you cannot but step on the graves. So when you put that big stone to prevent people from stepping on, it's not going to happen. And again, please don't write the verses of the Quran on the stone, because people will be stepping on it. We don't want to do something wrong. So how is, Brother Yasser, how is the burial conducted under COVID-19 restrictions? We know that before COVID, we used to bring the body here, we used to pray janazah here, and then take the body to the graveyard, and as many people as possible can attend. Now, under COVID-19, so what are the restrictions that people should expect?
Yes, definitely, very, very important. And COVID, it's been hard for a lot of families that have experienced a loss in the family. In terms of the janazah and the funeral, it's been very hard for them to work around COVID because it's just very strict regulations. And in terms of we don't bring the body here anymore. We don't do the washing here anymore, and we don't do the janazah prayers here anymore. That's all. The washing is done at the mortuary, and then when it comes to the washing, she's only allowing about two additional people to the washer. So there's 2 washers and then 2 additional family members to come in and assist with the wash. Obviously before it was as many as possible. I mean, as many as you need, but because of COVID, we had to keep the number down. So she's only allowing 2 additional people. Family is not allowed in the mortuary. So usually family was, if it was a big family, they were allowed to wait in the lobby of the mortuary. They're not allowed in the mortuary at all. They have to wait in their cars. And so when the washing is over and it's time for the family to kind of view, say their, goodbyes and stuff, they'll have to view from outside of the glass doors. So they have to view from outside of the glass doors, and they'll have to see the body from there. And then the 2 washers and the 2 additional family members are going to be inside, and then kind of, finishing that up. When it comes to the burial is, the cemetery will tell you 20 people maximum, which is definitely recommended, especially during COVID. And this is something that Sheikh Taha actually taught me, a few years back when I was washing someone that was more of it was kind of like a biohazard. And so he told me that you're not required to wash. And why don't we're not even required to bring them into the masjid. Why? Because the health of the living is more important than the process and the rituals of the deceased, because the deceased has already passed away. And the whole point of the washing and the janazah and all that stuff and the burial is not for the deceased, because regardless they're going to pass away with their sins and their good deeds. So they've already done what they needed to do in their life. After they pass away, it's already too late, obviously. So it's more for the living, for the family around them to see, this is the future of all of us. This is where we're going to be ending up, and this is what you're going to be doing. So manipulating, a body with your hands, just to kind of give you a reminder of what your purpose is in this dunya, and how to keep doing better. So yeah, it's more for the living. So in this sense, the health of the living is more important, takes priority to the rituals of the deceased. So definitely keeping that number low during COVID, with the social distancing and the masking and stuff, which I know it's going to be hard, for a lot of family members. It's very hard to not attend their loved one's funeral, right? But obviously right now, there's nothing else you can do about it. So, so that's just the case. So it's 20 people max at the cemetery. In the washing room, it's 2 people. And that's basically, and the janazah prayer is done at the cemetery now. So we used to bring the body here first and then take them over to the cemetery, but it's actually done at the cemetery right outside the gate of Ar-Rahma Garden. So Ar-Rahma Garden is a gated area in La Vista Cemetery. So Ar-Rahma Garden is only Muslims are in there. We have a few masajid in there actually. So the car actually parks right outside the gates, and then we perform the janazah prayer right outside, and then go ahead and walk them over to the grave.
All right, so the last questions, I just received a question from a community member saying, is there a standard size of the gravestone? Is there any standard size?
I'm not very familiar with the exact, it's just, the standard size is usually, I believe it's about 8 inches by 20 inches. But don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. So you would have to definitely double check with the cemetery. But they do have a standard size which is, $700. It's just a, very, very basic rectangle. And then they just include, you can actually write it down on a piece of paper what you want them to include. So if you want to write the name in Arabic, that's totally fine. But like as Sheikh Taha mentioned, please avoid writing any kind of, verses from the Quran.
Yeah. Jazakallah khair, Brother Yasir. And we know that when it comes to the funeral and the mortuary, it's not about only paperwork. It's not about paying money to buy the grave. It's beyond that. It's more than that. It is about the sentiments and the feelings of the family members who lost their loved one. So that's why, as we try our best to serve you with dignity when it comes to doing the paperwork and providing you with the grave, we always also try to make you feel comfortable by having our Imam doing the dua, leading Salat al-Janaza, giving a reminder over there. This is also very important. And also counseling the family members of the deceased brother or the deceased sister by reminding them that this is sunnatullahi fil hayat. This is the universal rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all of us, we will go there sooner or later. We don't know who is the next one. So this is also very important. So we try to make the family members feel better, feel comfortable, and assisting them in the time when they mourn their loved one who died. So this is what we wanted to present to you tonight. I hope that this information will be beneficial for all of us. And as Brother Yasir mentioned, if you have any further questions about something that we didn't mention, so please feel free to contact us here, our office at the Islamic Center, or through our Facebook page, or email Brother Yasir, and we will answer all your questions, inshallah. I know also that the spiritual side of the death and the ritual side, fiqhul janaza, what we call fiqhul janaza, is something also very important. I remember a long time ago I gave a series of classes on this, but soon inshallah we are going to have another session just to go through fiqh al-janaza and to remind each other what are we supposed to do when it comes to the rituals and spirituality when we lose a loved one. So, Jazakallah khair, Brother Yasir. May Allah bless you, reward you for the time. And Jazakumullah khair, my brothers and sisters who are watching. Please keep us in your dua. Barakallahu feekum, Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.